Great Wednesday. Welcome to the Healing America's Narratives podcast. I'm your host, King. I'm joined by my co-host, Reggie. How you doing today, Reggie?
Doing well, King. It's good to be back. We have gone, I think, probably 3 or 4 weeks due to different obligations where we haven't been able to do this. So it's good to be back this morning with you.
Yeah, I've been out of the country, made things a little challenging more than I thought it would be for 3 of those weeks, and health issues and on our part. So yeah, our commitment stayed the same. We wanted to be here, so our listening audience, we ask for your grace with understanding why we wasn't able to be with you the last 4 weeks, but we're back now and fully engaged. And I'm sure Reggie has a great topic for us. But before we get into that, what's your spiritual energy number, Reggie?
I'm working out of 10. I mean, I have the, uh, the dental issue I spoke about last week when we spoke privately is not quite resolved. Um, but that's just an inconvenience at this stage of the game. So I'm showing up fully engaged with a 10 out of 10.
Absolutely. Excellent. And I join you with that being a 10. And then I get into my gratitude moment, what I'm grateful for this morning. The ability to, again, my life, my health, my ability to see here, walk, talk, stand, breathe, and have a sound mind and the 24 hours to pursue my purpose in life. I'm grateful for the challenges and problems in my life because through those I gain wisdom and I grow. And I'm also grateful for being able to get back on today's show or get back on our show today, I should say. Um, we've had our challenges in the past couple of weeks, but we're back here. And then just the infinite possibilities that today is going to provide. How about yourself, Reggie? What's your gratitude this morning?
Yeah, so as always, I mean, I'm grateful for, I'll be very current. So it's been in the 30s degree wise here for the past day or two. And I'm grateful to be in a warm house with heat and a roof and windows, which not everybody has that. I'm aware of that. Um, Grateful for indoor plumbing, for a refrigerator with food in it, having all of my basic needs met. And then, for the most part, having a sound body and, as far as I can tell, mind. And then a group of people that I love, friends and family, and getting up every morning and doing work that I care about. So I'm grateful for all of that and more.
Excellent. Excellent. Excuse me. I'm still going to have some last remnants of my cold I came back with. Thought I was at 100%, but I see I still got a little congestion. I'll get through it today. So now, with that being said, we got gratitude out of the way. We've also got our spiritual engine numbers. Both of us are at 10. Let's start our show. What's today's topic?
Yeah, so it's as folks who are have been following us for a few years now know that this is based on the idea of healing America's narratives, which was a title of my 2022 book. Um, and currently, as anybody who's paying even a little bit of attention knows, that the democratic process in the United States of America, which is by all means an imperfect process, but which has progressed over some almost 250 years now, is currently being dismantled by the folks who authored Project 2025 and their hired leader, Donald Trump. And the number of illiberal and or non-democratic things that have been going on since January 20th, 2025 are too many to enumerate today. So we have to be selective in what we pick. But the basic strategy has been to overwhelm the states, the people, many tens of thousands of federal workers who have been fired or furloughed. To overwhelm the courts, there are several hundred lawsuits, ongoing lawsuits against the federal government, and to overwhelm basically some of the guardrails of our constitutional democracy, which include the separation of powers, separation of church and state, and basically the United States Congress has been completely rendered dysfunctional by the Republican majority in both houses. They together have closed down the federal government for over a month now. It may reopen in the next day or so. And there's just more. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Many millions of people are suffering because of this. The results have not directly impacted me where I'm sitting right now, but I care as much about other people as I do about those closest to me. So this should be upsetting to anybody who's paying attention. That said, today we want to really zero in and focus our attention on the frightening level that the states, led by Texas and led by the governor of Texas, following a request by the president of the United States to change the congressional voting districts so that they get 4 or 5 more Republican representatives in Congress in the next election, and followed up by an attempt by California to do the same thing to neutralize Texas's gains. And then other states, I'm just going to go down the list quickly, who are following suit or who may follow suit. Missouri and North Carolina have already done that. Ohio is already scheduling that. Virginia is probably going to. Maryland, Indiana, Florida may do the same thing. Illinois, Nebraska, New Hampshire, Kansas, Colorado, Washington, and Oregon, as of right now, don't seem to be. Now, that process is called gerrymandering. It's not new. Most of us know about that. But the polarization and the dysfunction in the United States federal government, and especially in Congress, is so great now that the Republican Party, who initiated this, and the Democratic Party, who's trying to fight back against it, and not to say the Democrats are innocent, but in this particular case, the people who work in game theory would say they have a perverse incentive to do the same things the Republicans are doing. Otherwise, they're going to lose complete control of the House of Representatives. Well, right now it's pretty close. Republicans have a few more seats. So they have this perverse incentive to gerrymander in their own states to try to push back against the seats being taken by the states in the Republican states who have done this at the request of the President of the United States. So more to the point, the way the electorate is set up, according to the Constitution, and it's flawed to begin with, which we can get into, but the way it's set up is we elect our representatives. And with the gerrymandering being done the way it's done now, our representative states are electing the voters. They're putting them in certain categories so that certain people in certain categories, their votes will count more, and certain people in certain other categories, their votes will count less. And then when the Republicans do that, with very, very few exceptions, the votes that don't count are poor and or black and brown voters. Right? So in other words, they're put into districts where even if they win the district, it's not going to impact how many congressional seats are in Congress. So it's a real, again, ongoing dismantling of democratic process. And the last thing I'll say, probably the most upsetting thing to me is outside of, I think it's been 3 now, No Kings protests, which were, the last one had about 7 million people nationwide, and another X number of millions in other countries. Other than some really good organizations and people fighting these things in courts, American citizens pretty much are doing nothing about it. I know it's cold now. It's harder to go outside. I've been outside a few times by myself with my sign. It's much more fun and much more invigorating when there are other people standing there with you. But it's almost as though American citizens, I'm going to put them into 3 categories. One is they're in favor of allowing this to continue, for the democracy to be dismantled. That's one. A second possibility is they're ignorant of what's going on. That's two. And the third possibility is that they know what's going on and they can't be bothered engaging with it because they just think it's not worth it. Um, so that's frightening and somewhat upsetting. But again, the focus is on the states who control their congressional districts, changing them in order to change whose votes count and whose votes don't count when it comes to electing people to the United States House of Representatives. That's the specific place where the gerrymandering is impactful. And I'll pause there.
Well, again, I think you chose another timely topic, um, and appreciate the time you took to create the topic and be present. My initial take is this. I'm a again. You hear me say this all the time. And I use this description of me just because I believe it helps sets a context. And so until I get to the point where I don't believe it's serving it, I won't use it as much. But system engineering me always looks for the crux of the problem. And I mention that mainly because when you look at things from the engineering perspective, you don't tap into your cultural giving that you titled. You focus on just what the information is, what the data is, without your bias or your hopes or your opinions and judgments. And now, with that being said, I look at it as what we're seeing is, again, within America's system of white supremacy, you can't have to your what you laid out earlier with Democrats are now fighting gerrymandering with the system Republicans are doing. You can't be just in an unjust system. The system is unjust to begin with. So if you try to play with morality and justice in the unjust system, then you're definitely going to lose anyway, because the system is not playing with those rules. It's like a analogy of football. And, for people out there who maybe not watch football, may not understand the dynamics of the game, I'm going to try to just make it simple to make my point. Is that you have two teams playing against each other, and the goal behind football is to control the field and get as much of the other person's yardage as possible over the 50. And then you do that more and often and get to a touchdown. Now, with that being said, there's rules of how you have to play. And they have referees there to enforce the rules to make sure it's a fair game. And what I'm liking the situation we're dealing with right now to a football game is like you have the Democrats, you have the Republicans, are two opposing football teams. And the Republicans not only are hoping to win, obviously, the game, but they also have the referees, most of the referees siding with them. So even when the Democrats do get a first down, the referee will throw a flag and say holding and bring the play back. So you can't get very far. So you got to play against that. But then again, you look at, to your point about the three different people, as you define three different types of people, you define as far as where they are right now with regards to how they're responding to America's democracy being eroded. And as you stated in your book, and this for me is what I look at, going back to the data. It's my point. As you stated so eloquently in your book, Looking at American Narratives, to me, the same type of thought mindset that will do what it has done to enslave Africans and dehumanize them, to do what it's done to Native Americans and dehumanize them to take control of the land, to dehumanize women over the years, the wars that we've had, um, the same mindset, the same thinking. We're seeing that play out itself now, and it's much more. It's not. It's not as subtle as it's been in the past. It was much more discreet, much more strategic. Now it's just blatantly in your face. And Project 2025 is the plan of how to get it executed, how to really bring back white supremacy full as the culture. And that's what the goal is to make white supremacy the culture of America. And that's what I see. And anything else, everything else is just examples of how that's been manifested, how that's been executed, how that's been carried out. And, you look at the lies, you look at the Trump was the first president to come along who can hold up the white supremacy mantra and ideology and agenda, and then at the same time has a charisma to attract 75 million Americans to his side. Other folks like David Duke and all those others who were known white supremacists before, who would have wanted to execute the same vision and mission, didn't have the charisma of Donald Trump, didn't have the ability to come in with the arrogance, narcissistic as Donald Trump is. And so that's what we're seeing manifest itself out in real time. And what's interesting to me is how people, as you say, are responding to it. I want to maybe, I haven't thought about it deeply because you just shared your categories, but my initial, I would say, response to it is, and maybe some of what I'm going to say, those folks, when we do a deeper discussion, may fit in those three categories. But I think, again, it goes back to the identity. I think people who are black, who identify as black, and I've talked to, and I can relate to this because I allow myself to go with my cultural givens, and that's something I wrestle with daily when I see things that trigger me. But if I look at it from their perspective, you're looking at it from a perspective of, well, this is what black feel that we've suffered since the country's been in existence. This is really nothing new to us. To see just blatant lies, courts not siding with us, even though the law says this, the media being biased against black folks. So we've always felt that and then didn't feel justice from it. But we always felt we were the victim and told we were the victim and told it wasn't as bad. But now folks see it's just as bad. It's blatant. ICE comes in and they're willing to snatch up brown people and kick them out of the country, rip them out of the house, just without any real probable cause, masked. I mean, as evil as they can possibly be to carry out that action, they've been given the green light to do it. And then, of course, they have unlimited budget, even doing the shutdown. So it's like the hypocrisy, that's just racism full force. We see that. Uh, Now, Trump, again, does lies and he does his things to just give us media to try to play around and just not come out and just say blatantly, we're going to kill all the brown people or we're going to get rid of all the brown people, mainly because they want to put whites back in the majority of the country. That's the agenda. And they definitely want to make sure that the brown folks, as well as the black folks, anyone who's non-white male, doesn't have power, doesn't have the ability to change the laws, doesn't have the ability to create laws that impact non-white people. I mean, white people. So that's one of the main things that they won't allow to happen. You can play within the system and get elected, but you never create new laws that's going to personally impact white men. And their system is set up to make sure that never happens, and it never has happened. So that's my initial take. I know I've kind of talked around about several different things, but I just get the root of it. And again, I'm not saying that everybody, I just want to be clear. I'm not saying that all white people are racist. I'm not saying that at all. I think white people who identify, human beings who identify as white identity, I think that can make you tap into white privilege and you receive the benefits of it. And I think that's where we need to really get away from, is having everybody get away from their racial identities, gender identities, political identities, and just focus on being human. And if we did that, we can see where injustice is happening and then do things to stop injustice from happening. But until we get to that part, I don't think that things are going to change at all. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. So I think it's almost a reckoning that's happening where America has to go through this because of the things you talked about, atrocities, you talked about healing its narratives. It's done in the past. It has to have, from just a universal karmic perspective, it has to have this reckoning, because right now you have folks who all around the world who have woken up and they're saying everybody wants their rights. Everybody wants to treat it as human beings. They're not willing to go back to being less than human and not having any power and not having their voice heard and having their what they feel as their needs represented at the table of resources, land, and capital. And so as long as they're excluded from that, which they've been in the past, they're not going to just sit back and let that happen. So that's the reckoning we're dealing with here in America. How far it goes before we switch over to what you and I talk about, we hope, where we could all become more fully human and the world would operate in that space. How much pain and more suffering we have to go through before that happens uh, is my question.
Yeah. I just want to piggyback on kind of how the last couple of things you said. Like I believe that every conversation I have now with somebody who might disagree with me politically, my starting point when I'm 100% present and conscious, which is, I'd like to think is most of the time, but it's not always, is that I begin with saying that I believe in the dignity of every human being, like with period. In other words, I don't add regardless of gender, race, blah, 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 sexual. I don't add that anymore. I believe in the dignity of all human beings, of every human being. All and every are words we learn in grade school. They don't need to be qualified, right? So period. And then the rest of the conversation has to constantly come back to that. Either you agree with the dignity of every human being and you want to support it and honor it, or you don't. And as you just really eloquently played out, if you're Black in America, and again, you and I know that we're not creating this monolith, because not all Black people agree with each other, not all white people agree with each other, not all heterosexuals agree.
Right.
So we're not talking about any monoliths here. But anybody who's paying attention, maybe not in Florida, Texas, Oklahoma, or Georgia, but those of us who actually honor what history really is, honor what you just said. If you're Black in America, but not only if you're an African American, if you were an African on this continent before there was an America, no laws helped you. You were enslaved, and then once slavery was banned, you were subjected to Jim Crow and lynchings, and you couldn't vote until 1965 in the former slave states. So, point well taken. Right? Anybody who denies that, they're not having a real conversation. It's almost a waste of time to be in conversation with them. I say almost because I believe in trying to have that conversation. But nowadays, it's in terms of the specific focus today, and you mentioned it. If it's a bad time to look like you're Latino or Muslim, especially Latino right now. As of mid-October, 170 American citizens have been arrested and detained by ICE, even though they had and I'm not talking about legal immigrants, documented immigrants. I'm talking about American citizens, some of whom were born here, some of whom were naturalized citizens who chose to become citizens. Some of them were at work with their real IDs. A real ID is something that the federal government recognizes as proof of citizenship. In some states, like my driver's license here in Connecticut, has a little gold star in the upper right-hand corner, which is as good as a passport within the United States. I mean, if I want to fly to another country, it's not as good as a passport. And that's an example of real ID. Some of these 170 folks, and that was a number in mid-October, who were like you, like me, American citizens. The majority of them were brown-skinned. And I'm guessing, I don't know this next piece for sure, I'm guessing the majority of them had an accent that sounded like they were from a Central or South American or Caribbean nation, were detained by masked white, black, and brown, as a matter of fact, ICE agents, mostly wearing, as I said, wearing masks. That's the very thing that's written into the Constitution, in fact, that federal troops aren't supposed to be doing that. And not supposed to be doing that. Now, so that's one piece. I wanted to just back all the way up to see part of how we got here. And this is what I'm going to say next is a deep bow to Jill Lepore, who's a historian and brilliant writer. And her new book is entitled We the People, A History of the U.S. Constitution. And in there, she describes the process at the Constitutional Convention and how the Constitution was finally written and then eventually ratified. and she points to three fundamental flaws in Article 5 of the Constitution. And she says, here are what those three flaws are. And they directly impact what we're talking about today. One was it gave disproportionate power to the smaller states and the slave states. Not all of the smaller states were slave states, right? And it did so. The smaller states all got equal representation in the Senate. So right now, for example, Wyoming has just under 600,000 people. California has 39 million people. They have equal representation in the United States Senate. So that's the small state, large state representation problem. Something that doesn't impact us as much now because slavery has been outlawed. But in the first, 1787 to 1865 and forward, the slave states were overrepresented in the House of Representatives because they got to count enslaved people, the 3/5 compromise, as part of their population. So they got more representatives in Congress, through the end of the Civil War. And then there's two other points that Lepore makes, which I don't have articulate enough understanding yet. But basically, even today, the United States Senate doesn't represent the people of the United States, because in order to get all 13 colonies at the time on board, the United States Constitution never mentions slavery, uses a bunch of euphemisms to refer to people who were imported into the nation or onto the continent. That's how they refer to it. Never mentions slavery, and gives disproportionate representation, again, in the House to the slave states and in the Senate to the smaller states. Now, I live in a smaller state. Connecticut has around 3 million people in it. And we have a disproportionate presence in the Senate because of that. So whether it's California, Texas, Florida, New York, the four most populous states, and then whether it's Wyoming, I don't know if it's Montana, South Dakota, North Dakota, among the least populous states, they all have equal representation. And that's a great strategy to unify the states to form the union. But in terms of it being truly democratic, it doesn't really give all of the people a representative voice. And there are some other flaws we could talk about. But that's what the gerrymandering now, again, asked for by the President of the United States directly to the governor of Texas. It was a public statement. I mean, social media, I guess, is public. To please find us 4 or 5 more seats. And Greg Abbott, former Attorney General of Texas, current governor of Texas, went ahead and did that. This is the low level, the low ethical, moral level of leadership that we have in this country now. And again, I'm picking those two because they started this mess, this particular gerrymandering battle. Trump and then Abbott. And then other states have joined in order to continue to fight the battle and take the voices away from U.S. citizens in all of the states. So depending on the state you live in, your vote may count increasingly less, if at all, based on how these districts are being redrawn. So it's a real problem for anybody who believes in democracy. And again, you and I have spoken about this. There are a lot of problems in the American democracy, and there have been since its inception. But there has been progress. And there are good people, and there used to be good people in the Republican Party. Most of them have left, the ones who really cared about the country, and have either become independents or have quietly voted Democrat because of what Trump and Project 2025 are doing. So there are still good people trying to fight this fight, but it's an uphill battle because the Supreme Court is a biased court. I mean, sorry. There's no other way to say it. The Congress is completely Republican, MAGA Republican, and the White House is Project 2025 being executed by the man who the Christian right funded to get into the White House, because he was charismatic and he would lie about anything and convince people that he was telling the truth. And that's where we are right now. And a lot of people will continue to support him and think that what he's doing is okay. We'll see, a year from now, we will have had the midterm elections. We'll see how that goes. We just had a hint, perhaps, with and one other thing I want to say before because in fairness to Gavin Newsom and the people of California, what the governor and the legislatures did in Texas was they gerrymandered the districts. They didn't ask the people what they wanted. They just did it. What Gavin Newsom did in California, to his credit, was he put a referendum on the ballot for this past election, where he said to the people of California, here's what Texas is doing. Here's what we can do to combat it. If you vote in favor of this, we will change our voting districts in order to counter the votes that they gain in Texas. If you vote against it, we won't. So he gave it to the people to decide. And by more than 60%, the people in California said yes to that. Virginia voted for its first female governor, and New Jersey elected a Democratic female governor as well. And there's a few other local victories as well. So the pushback seems to be happening, but it doesn't guarantee anything, because in the federal government right now, the Democrats have virtually no power. And the Republicans are either on board with MAGA or they're too afraid to fight back. And I don't care which one it is. They're not helping democracy. If they're on board with MAGA, they're not helping democracy. If they're cowards, they're not helping democracy. So I'll be quiet now.
Well, as you say, going back to gerrymandering, again, I look at that as just a Republican, they know they have to do that in order to stay in power. So to me, it's kind of like when you understand chess and then you understand the movements of the board, and you begin to understand what moves can my opponent possibly make. And I have to think 7 steps ahead. They make this move, I make this move, etc. And if you can do that, then of course you're going to be more likely to win the game of chess based on your understanding and your ability to think further moves ahead. The Democrats don't show that at all. It's clear what the Republicans are doing. I mean, they don't have the numbers to win from public. I mean, just based off the U.S. population and how many people would want the change to happen, they won't win those numbers. They won't win that kind. So they have to have the electoral college in place. They have to use gerrymandering tricks. And see, this is what I'm saying as far as when you say people who, you talk about the 3 categories of people, and this is what I was saying about some of those individuals. I think some of those individuals are not inspired to come out and just vote Democrat just because you vote Democrat just because they're not as bad as the Republicans. So that's the only reason, because Democrats not really shown a true leadership standpoint to say, here's what we're truly fighting for, and here's what we're going to do for you. That's just as radical as what the right is taken away from. Mm-hmm. Democrats are saying, get excited about just getting back to where we were. And we know there wasn't justice, but at least it wasn't as bad as it is right now. So let's get you back there. And it's like, if you're going to take away health care, Obamacare for me as Americans, then the Democrats, they want to get everybody inspired and get people rallied up and get people more active. Then the fight has to be, well, we want universal health care. Okay, you've already taken the gloves off. So we're not just trying to get back to regular Obamacare and high rates of medical care. And if anybody and you really experience that firsthand when you get to be 40 plus, you start to realize how important healthcare is. When you're 30 or less and you're pretty healthy, you don't really worry about healthcare as much. At least I didn't. I didn't go to the doctor much. ate what I wanted to eat, live life because youth. But when you start to get older and you realize those choices you made at that time, how they begin to affect you and impact you, and health becomes very important. And then each decade, it gets even more and more important and more critical. And so they're not fighting for that. They're not getting people inspired. They're not getting people to come out and just say, I want to get back to just where I was, especially. So we had to take some losses, and that's where we are right now. If you look at how so many people are pissed at Democrats for saying for the eight they caved and gave in. It's like, we were ready to fight. People are, yeah, people not getting paid from their jobs, but health care is on the line. We understand we're in a fight right now. So we're not expecting things to be normal. So we're willing to go ahead and sacrifice in order to win this fight. And so, of course, Republicans are saying, well, and Trump, somebody liking him to, I don't know if people had seen the original Dark Knight with Batman with Keith Ledger, and he played the Joker, and the Joker, Batman was beating the Joker in this one scene, and he was telling, "Tell me where the bombs are," and the Joker was just getting beaten, didn't care, and he said, "What you got to understand, Batman, is there's nothing you can do to me that's gonna impact me enough to make me tell you where the bombs are. There's nothing you can do to me. I don't care." See, Trump doesn't care. So when you fight an enemy who doesn't care about, well, I'm not running for re-election, or if I do, I'll just take it. So he's not worried about having to run and get approval. So he don't care about percentage points and polling and all those things for Trump personally. He don't care about that. The Supreme Court has given him complete immunity. So whatever crimes he commits, he's not going to be prosecuted. They told him that. So that's not even a threat to him. So basically, what can you do to him? And he can just say whatever he wants until people finally, until he's hurt enough people. And that's why the shutdown was so important to continue, because the more his people got hurt, then that's the only choice you can hope that he cracking his armor. But if his people are not going to be hurt as much, then there's not going to be a change. Because I still see, even to this day, Black Republicans who are MAGA, which I don't understand why on earth are they MAGA, that still support Trump and still support him like he's done nothing wrong. And it's like, for them to be that in line and that sleep where they don't get any benefit, where it's clearly showing you that Nick Fuentes is now becoming the primary voice of the Republican Party, the growing voice that's getting more attention, that's getting more. The young Republicans have been exposed for being racist, and they still want to support their party when it's clear that party doesn't care about them at all. And so I say all that to say, when you go back to gerrymandering, is that those things to keep them in power, are just plays Republicans are doing. And if so, Democrats truly want to counter that and get people inspired to stop that, then they have to be willing to say, we're going to get rid of the electoral college, right? They got to begin to think about things that really benefit them and their constituents. Then we can forever do away with these games. Like, you got to really begin to be able to say, we're going to fight to change the system. But we see the Democrats not willing to fight. They caved, they gave, even though they know the Republicans are not going to do a vote, or if they do vote, they're not going to vote in favor of anything the Democrats want, but they still caved because they felt that, and I feel it's a deeper conspiracy that we will talk about another show. I just wanted to kind of stay on topic for your point you made about the gerrymandering. And I just think that Gavin Newsom is going to be on the right side of history with what California has done. I think what he's doing with that is strategic, and at least he's thinking and showing that, okay, I understand what the Republicans are doing, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I capitulate. If you want to play that game, we're big enough, we can play that game as well. And that's the kind of thinking you need. But see, even still, what Gavin Newsom is still doing is just trying to make things equal, make things just. And it's like, at what point is someone going to come along and say that let's really fight for the people, to give people their true rights? Because that's the war we're in right now. We shouldn't try to fight to get back to just where we were before, status quo, where we understand that still most Americans don't have health care. Healthcare costs are rising. Seniors are not being taken care of. Um, Housing is not affordable. When you can sit here and tell folks that I'm not going to feed my people in the United States, I'm going to still send $24 billion over to Venezuela. You know, that's just, you know, completely not in line with any logical thinking of any person who would be proud to be American. You will allow that to happen. And to say you throw that out the window as well because you're a MAGA shows me that why should the Democrats continue to uphold to the constitutional perspective that you mentioned before? It's like once you understand those things were inherently evil in the Constitution, it wasn't just. Then we need to be changing those things. That's how you're gonna get people to really get inspired and really believe things can happen. But the Democrats not fighting for that. They're just fighting just to. I want to get back to where things were before they got too off. But I want people to be excited about that. And it's like people have no faith in the Democratic Party at all anymore. And the only thing the Democratic Party is getting is votes because you're not as bad as Republicans.
Yeah. So I want to just add one thing to that because I agree with what you're saying. Um, the Democratic Party, if they want to move forward, they have to, first of all, Chuck Schumer can't be even if they get a hold of the Senate, he can't be the minority or the majority leader. He can't lead. And Hakeem Jeffries, whom I liked when he was first named minority leader, he's got to go too. There are a lot of young Democratic men and women in Congress who are leaders, who are really talented and who are, agree with you basically. There's two guys, and I'm going to forget their names. I think one is from Pennsylvania, one is from New York. I think the guy from New York is Pat Ryan, and the other guy is from Pennsylvania. It's an Italian last name, like Deluzio or something like that. I should know both of their names, but they're on the Veterans Committee in Congress. They might even be co-chairs of the Veterans Committee in the House of Representatives. And one of them was in the Navy, one of them was in the Army, so they're veterans and they're congressmen now. And these guys are sick of it. I mean, they're looking for a fight. I mean, in a way that I would agree with just about everything that they said. And there are more like that. As we've gotten to watch Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, mature. And I'm not saying she was immature when she first got elected, but she's grown into a really serious, respected lawmaker. And so I think that. So I agree with you, and I think that the party has to choose new leaders moving forward because Schumer and Jeffries aren't getting it done. I don't think they can get it done. And there's some good people to pick from in that party who, want to move things forward, not go back to the status quo. So I agree, but the leadership has to shift for sure.
And I'm saying that because as they fight for the gerrymandering, which they should strategically, it's like, but if even they win that, what are you going to do with that? That becomes the question, and that's where I was alluding to. And you articulated it by saying Jeffries and Schumer have to go, but again, the platform has to be about bringing change.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things the Republicans have shown is that for their base, they're saying we're gonna at least give you hate, and we convince you that your enemy is minorities, is brown people, is black people, is trans people, that those are the reasons why your life is horrible and miserable. And we're gonna make one thing's for sure for you, we're gonna make their lives worse than yours. And their base is like, okay, well, I'm not getting anything else out of it, but I'll take that. And as long as you want to keep doing that, then you're gonna keep getting my vote. And I'm gonna vote for things that are disadvantaged, that are not in line with the values of the country, the benefit for the country. But as long as those people suffer, because those are my enemies, then you have my vote. And the Democrats don't have that undying loyalty, and that's where we are right now. Right. They don't have a base of people that are saying, well, I'm going to vote for you regardless of whether your policies impact me or not. Democrat voters are more like, well, if you're not going to do anything for me, I'm going to do anything for you. And so this is why the Republicans stay more and more in power because of that. And maybe what's going to have to happen out of this is that I think you got a little more faith in the system than I do. Like, I don't think the Democrats will allow AOC to be the face, or the people you spoke of to really be the face of the party. They're not going to allow it, because if that was the case, they would allow Bernie to be the face. He had to be. He's really an independent. That he ran on the Democratic ticket both times, and of course the Democratic Party blocked him when it came time, when he had all the momentum, all the interest, all the people behind him. They said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to let Hillary do it, and they lost. And they came back and did it again. And they chose to throw Kamala out there, and then Kamala is not somebody who shows people where we're going to really rally behind you and support you because we feel that you're behind us. They didn't get that from her. Again, the best you can say was she wasn't Trump. She wouldn't do all the things that Trump has done, and she would have done all the evil. Maybe so, but the other things that people have an issue with what's going on, were you going to stop Israel for what they're doing in Palestine? No, you wasn't going to stop that. So were you going to stop Native American girls who right now are the most victimized female population in the United States that have been just kidnapped and killed, and there's no recourse, there's no justice for them. It's just, you just have to accept that because they're low on the priority list of what's happening in America right now, and there's no one doing anything about that. And yet still, so my point is, until the Democrats really decide, and I don't think they will. I don't see them allowing because Democrats still are controlled by big corporations, and big corporations at the end of the day. And here's the thing that's consistent. I'll conclude my take on this point. Here's what's consistent is that no matter what party is in power, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, whether it's AOC or whoever it is that can be even president, if she gets to that level, here's what I know that's not going to change: the wealth inequality. It's still going to be the same. They're not going to, either one is not going to change that. It's still going to be the 1% still controlling most of the wealth. They'll talk about it, but they'll make sure that no legislation about changing that gets done. It gets passed. It'll be some rogue Democrat that comes out and is to vote against that. If a bill does hit the table, they'll make sure it doesn't pass. Something like that will come along. The Democratic, I'm forgetting the guy from West Virginia who was the he's no longer in office right now. Thinking his name right now.
Joe Manchin.
Joe Manchin, right? He played that role, to be the obstructionist, to make sure that if something really progressive was going to happen, he was going to make sure that, no, I'm not going to let that happen. I want to break with my party. We're not getting that. And there's always obstructionists like that that's been throughout the Democratic Party. That's always going to be the case. So to me, that's what history has shown me. That's what history has taught me. And maybe it's just time for, like I said, when you're ready for, and you're looking at a forest that's really not generating good soil, and the plants and the trees not growing well, then you have to just start over again. You have to pretty much set it on fire. Trump maybe made that reference before. You have to burn things to get nature turning again. I'm not saying that that's what I wish for, but maybe, we need a third party. We need something different, but it can't just be, we're going to fight just to get back to where we were before. If that's the Democrats' message, then I just think that we're going to continue to keep losing. And I know, but here's the final thing I want to say on that point. Until people get enough, so sick of losing, when it becomes so tough that they step out of those three categories you said before. I mean, they step out of two of those categories you said before and said, okay, we're going to actually fight, and we're going to fight for change. And that's where then, when most Americans are in that space where they're fighting for all access to health care, they're fighting to change the way the system is currently constructed. What that threshold is, I don't know.
Yeah. So what I want to do is just say one last thing, and maybe this will be our topic for next week. But one of the problems among many, in terms of structural institutional problems, is how hard it is to amend the Constitution. And it's really, really difficult. And it's more difficult now, and because of the polarization of the parties in the United States right now. But here's the language of Article 5. And I think this is what we'll do next week. Okay, consider these numbers. It's almost like a comedy show. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses, so imagine anything, King, where 2/3 of the Senate and 2/3 of the House of Representatives would agree. Whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or, here's the other possibility, on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the states, of the several states. So if 2/3 of the 50 states legislatures agree and they agree to call a convention for proposing amendments, then it goes on from there. I'm not going to read the whole thing. So if you look historically at when amendments were passed, they typically followed, not always, but often they followed some major event. So you had immediately after the Constitution, 2 years later, you had basically the Bill of Rights, a year and a half later, whatever it was. Immediately after the Civil War, you had the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. Vietnam gave us, was it the 21st, when it allowed 18-year-olds to vote? I forget exactly what it was. And there's some other examples. If you look at the trajectory of amendments, thousands have been proposed to this Constitution. 27 have passed. It's extraordinarily difficult. And while we want it to be, not an everyday occurrence, because then the Constitution would become a joke, this is another one of the flaws of what was compromised in the Constitutional Convention. In order to get all 13 colonies on board, it's extraordinarily difficult to amend the Constitution. And the fact that small states and the former slave states have equal representation to the large states and the non-slave states, the slavery issue is not as big, is not as important as it was, up to the 1860s. But there are some significant flaws, and changing them requires amendment, and the flaws are in how to amend the Constitution. So there's a real issue there, and I'm in the middle of learning this, so I'm going to say nothing. I'm going to stop there. We're not going to be more articulate about it. But amending the Constitution, even getting rid of the Electoral College, that's in the Constitution. Amending that will be extraordinarily difficult because it hurts certain states more than others, and it helps certain states more than others. And the states who are helped by it don't want to get rid of it. Those of us who want every vote to count in the presidential vote do want to get rid of it. And based on what you said, that's basically a Republican versus Democratic problem, because the Republicans know, even despite the fact that Trump got elected, they're on the wrong side of almost every major issue in this country. They're on the wrong side of healthcare. They're on the wrong side of women's right to choose. They're on the wrong side of sane gun legislation, not getting rid of guns, but getting assault rifles and different things. You're making it much harder to get them. Almost every issue, the Republican Party is out of step with what the people of this country say they want. And gerrymandering helps alleviate that. So I'll shut up.
and Donald Trump kind of even showed that you might not even have to gerrymander as much, because he's still winning. He had won Latino votes. He had won some black men's votes. He obviously continues to win white women's support, even though he is not doing anything for those groups at all. They still came out and support him and still support MAGA, because for some reason it's something that I don't know. I can't speak to folks who are not white men who vote for Trump. I mean, I get it if you're a white male and you're rich. Yeah, Trump is where you want to be. I was talking to a guy the other day who's a black man who's financially successful, and his politics lean Republican, but he wouldn't vote for Trump, you know. But like 50 Cent came out and he's against Madani, and he talked about how people should leave New York. And it's like, what? 50 Cent, you grew up on the same programs that he's fighting for. Your parents, your family. So, and you got to the point where, and I truly believe this. I don't have any facts to back this up other than my own observation and critical thought. I think it's impossible for you to get over $50 million in this world without selling your soul. In other words, you're not going to earn that off your own hustle. I don't care how smart you are, how successful your business is. I don't care what you create. I think it's impossible. I think the only way you can get over $50 million in this world is that you get invited to certain networks and you get those deals and you get access to close those kind of transactions. But it won't come off just hustle, grind, and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. And I think that once you get into that phase and you get into those circles, then you have to give up your caring. Like, you won't use that money to empower your community. You won't use that. You have to make those kind of agreements and terms. Again, I don't have any data to back that up other than just my own eyes, just observing and looking at how no matter where certain people, and it doesn't matter if they're black, white, that's where identity doesn't matter. It comes down to capital. They get to a certain capital level, you're in bed with everybody else that's thinking in that capital level. And you may still try to talk like you represent that community, but you're no way near connected or understand the concerns and needs of those people who are not at that level. And 50 Cent's comments about Madani showed that. And also showed the brilliance of Madani. I don't know if you saw his interview in response to 50 Cent. He said, well, I understand how 50 feels, but here's the thing about it. Every time I get a death threat, I still play his song Many Men every single time I hear it. So he just masterful. And see, that's the kind of Democrat that has to win. Someone like Obama, someone like Madani, who just these once in a generation talent, charisma, brilliant, wise. That's what has to win and galvanize people in order to just be a regular racist Republican. Mm-hmm. That's the part that's I find to be interesting. But yeah, we want to get ready to bring our show to a close. We got started late, so forgive me for the last little bit of diatribe. So let's go ahead and bring things to conclusion. So what do you see as some of our suggestions so we can go forth and still navigate this uncharted water we're dealing with?
Yeah, so because we painted with a pretty broad brush stroke today, beginning with the gerrymandering and how that's it's not a democratic process. It's an anti-democratic process. It's illiberal. It takes power from the people, especially from the party that said we're going to give the American government back to the people. When I hear them say that or read that, it's not funny because it's terrifying, but they just keep on getting away with saying shit like that. Is that who do you care about? And this is my go-to point, but it applies in so many areas. Do you really care about other people? Do you believe in the dignity of every human being? And if you do, look out there, look what's going on, and ask yourself what's fair. When you see masked ICE agents taking down a U.S. citizen who has brown skin and has a Spanish accent, probably not Spain Spanish, but whether he was, I don't know if he was Mexican American or Peruvian American, I don't know where he was from originally, but he's an American citizen, saying, I'm a citizen, I have my papers. He shouldn't have to say that in this country. I have my papers. How does that make you feel? Does that feel fair? All right. Because if it doesn't feel fair, you need to fight against that unfairness. And you have to figure out what would be fair and fight for that. Take any example. Take it to name calling that's going on against, to use Mondami as an example. Guy won an election in arguably one of the hardest cities to win an election. Because, you want to talk diversity, New York City is the United Nations. And I don't mean the building. If you've ever ridden the subway in the city, you're on that subway with people from probably not all 200 something countries on the planet, but you're close. And he won He won the mayor there. So enough people trusted him, and not close. I mean, he beat up on Cuomo by a whole, I forget the numbers now, but it was significant, by around 8 to 10 percentage points. So what's fair? I mean, if you don't care about other people, start caring. Find a way to care. I don't know what to say to you. But if you do, look at what's fair and put your energy and your time and your money, if you have it, behind that. I mean, what is fair to everyone, not just to people, not just to you and your family and people who you think are like you. What's fair to everyone, especially if you claim to be Christian? What's fair to the poorest of the poor? Right? The type of, what would Jesus do? I say that laughingly. I grew up Catholic. I believe in the teachings of Christ. I don't believe in what I was taught so much as a Catholic, because some of it was tainted. But the people who are running DC now, who are talking about Christianity, they're as far from Jesus Christ as you can get. What feels fair to you? That's the thing to practice.
Absolutely. I concur completely. I just want to add this last little piece of that I think that, if people actually follow that, the world will definitely be a better place. I'll just conclude with that since we're over. And now we reach a section of our show where we talk about highlighting and giving flowers to someone who we believe who either has lived the fully human behavior traits or is currently living their fully human behavior traits. And with that being said, my choice today, and that's going to probably be my choice for a while, because something happened recently where I'm starting to see this more and more and have more respect for any people in the Jewish community who was willing to condemn what Israel is doing, and the ones who supported Madani and didn't buy into the narrative that he was a jihadist and he hated Israel and he was going to do things to end Israel. And the reason I say this is because I have conversations with folks who happen to be of the Jewish faith and listen to them, and they are avid Democrats and hate Trump and all that he does until it gets to Israel, and then some clicks, and then they support Trump. And as far as they even say that they believe that he was great in ending the war, and was giving him his flowers for ending the war. And it was like, really, you believe he ended the war because he got a ceasefire for a day or two and got some hostages back? So for the folks who still stand up against that, doesn't buy into that, I sure lift them up as being fully human, because to me, they don't get the recognition they deserve. People paint Jews all in one brush as well. They generalize. And again, just because everybody's of that faith does not believe they all are lockstep with one thought and monolithic. So for the folks who stand up for humanity and see the injustice being done, and those I want to give the flowers to as being fully human.
Yeah, I love that example. I mean, especially I still have this image of the photograph of the group of Orthodox Jewish leaders in New York City with their beards and their hats and holding up the signs supporting Mandami. I mean, that's an image for a generation or two. That just was wonderful, and it breaks past through all of the things that we talk about bigotry and ignorance and arrogance and identity. Oh, we identify with being human.
Exactly.
Okay, we are Jewish and we are Orthodox Jewish, et cetera, and what all of that means. And here's what we believe. We're not buying into all that other stuff. So yeah, that's a great example. So I don't know if I've ever done this before, but I'm going to go back to, my buddy John Stewart, who, even though I haven't been able to get on his show, I don't hold that against him. But what he does every week now, there's the yuck part of it, the funny part where he looks at the news, and his staff and the writers do a great job lampooning the news. They do a great job of that. And then later in the show, he interviews maybe an author, it might be elected officials. In fact, the two congressmen who were veterans and younger members of Congress now that I was referring to earlier in this conversation. They were on this past Monday with Jon Stewart, and he prepares, and he's one of the smarter guys on TV. I mean, beyond there are no stupid comedians. The stupid comedians never make it. Like, we don't hear about them. You can't be stupid and be a good comedian. But he's prepared. He asks great questions, and he rarely throws softballs. The only time he did a softball interview, I thought he gave the guy that owns the Los Angeles Times, who's a brilliant guy, but who quashed the endorsement of Kamala Harris. He never asked him about that during that interview when he was on the show a few months back. But other than that, he holds people's feet to the fire. And he's really well informed. He's articulate. He holds a lot of information. He has it available to himself. So I just want to, take a deep bow to Jon Stewart's intelligence and humor, because he says things that are relevant and important, and he allows me to laugh out loud while he's saying them. So that's a great combination.
Yeah, I like Jon Stewart. I feel the same way about John Oliver as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so both they're from the same ilk, so same show actually. That's where I start. So thank you for that, Reggie. As we bring our show to a close, we want to thank you all for joining this episode of Healing America's Narrative. Until next week, Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Let's follow Reggie's advice. Let's look for ways so we can be kind, identify as human beings, and get away from this. If they're not part of my physical description tribe, that I don't care about them. Let's care about all human beings. Thank you.